The headlights barely cut through the white wall ahead. Jack Morgan had been driving trucks for 23 years, and he'd seen storms before. But this one had teeth. The wind shook his rig like it was nothing more than a toy, and the snow came down so thick he could hardly see the hood. He should have stopped hours ago. Every bone in his body told him to pull over and wait it out. But Jack had a delivery due in Billings by morning, and he'd never missed a deadline in his life. He was somewhere in the Montana backcountry, miles from the nearest town, when he saw it. At first, it looked like a snowdrift, just another lump on the side of the road. But something about the shape wasn't right. He squinted through the windshield, slowing down even though every instinct told him to keep moving. Then he saw the glint of metal. A car, buried halfway up the doors in snow. Jack pulled the rig over, his heart kicking hard in his chest. He grabbed his flashlight and climbed down into the blizzard. The cold hit him like a fist. He could barely keep his eyes open as he trudged through the snow toward the car. When he got close enough, he aimed the flashlight through the driver's side window. There was a woman inside. Her head was tilted against the seat, her skin pale as the snow around her. She wasn't moving. Jack yanked the door open, and a gust of freezing air rushed out. "Hey," he said, his voice rough and urgent. "Hey, can you hear me?" Her eyelids fluttered. That was all he needed. He reached in and unbuckled her seatbelt, then lifted her out of the car. She was light, too light, and her body was stiff with cold. He carried her back to the truck, his boots sinking deep with every step, the wind screaming in his ears. Inside the cab, he laid her across the passenger seat and cranked the heat as high as it would go. Her lips were blue. Her hands were like ice. Jack pulled a blanket from behind the seat and wrapped it around her, then grabbed a thermos of coffee from the cup holder. He didn't know if she could drink it, but he had to try. "Come on," he muttered, tilting her head gently and pressing the thermos to her lips. "Just a sip, that's all I need." She coughed, and a little bit of the coffee went down. Her eyes opened just a crack, and she looked at him with confusion and fear. "You're okay," Jack said softly. "You're safe now. I've got you." She didn't say anything. She just stared at him, her breath coming in shallow gasps. Jack set the thermos down and rubbed her hands between his, trying to get the blood moving again. He didn't know how long she'd been out there. Too long, that much was clear. "What's your name?" he asked, keeping his voice calm and steady. "Olivia," she whispered. Her voice was barely there, like something fragile that might break if he held it too tight. "Olivia. That's a good name. I'm Jack. You're gonna be fine, Olivia. We're just gonna sit here and wait out the storm, all right? I'm not going anywhere." She nodded, just barely, and closed her eyes again. Jack kept the heat running and stayed close, watching her breathe, making sure she didn't slip away. Outside, the storm raged on, but inside the cab it was warm, safe. He gave her more coffee when she could take it, and slowly, over the next hour, the color started coming back to her face. By the time the blizzard let up, it was nearly dawn. Olivia was awake, wrapped in the blanket, staring out at the white world beyond the windshield. She looked different now, calmer, stronger. But there was something in her eyes Jack couldn't quite read, something distant. "Thank you," she said quietly. "You saved my life." Jack shrugged. Anyone would have done the same. "No," she said, turning to look at him. "They wouldn't have." He didn't know what to say to that, so he just nodded and started the engine. "Where can I take you?" "Nearest town is fine." He drove her into a little place called Red Lodge, a few miles down the mountain. She didn't say much on the way, just sat there, holding the blanket around her shoulders, watching the road. When they pulled into town, she thanked him again, shook his hand, and stepped out into the cold morning air. Jack watched her walk away, her figure disappearing into the gray light. And then he got back on the road. He didn't think much about it after that. It was just one of those things that happen out on the highway. You help someone, you move on. That's the job. A week later, Jack got a call from dispatch. They told him to come into headquarters. He figured maybe there was a problem with his logs or his last delivery. He drove the 3 hours to Billings, walked into the Titan Freight building, and told the receptionist his name. "Mr. Morgan," she said with a smile that seemed a little too bright. "They're expecting you. Top floor." Jack frowned. He'd been with Titan for over 20 years, and he'd never been to the top floor. That's where the executives worked. People like him didn't go up there. He took the elevator, his stomach tight with worry. When the doors opened, a woman in a sharp suit was waiting for him. "Mr. Morgan, please follow me." She led him down a long hallway and into a big corner office with windows that looked out over the whole city. And standing there, hands folded in front of her, was Olivia. Jack stopped cold. For a second, he thought he was seeing things. But it was her. Same face, same eyes. Only now she was wearing a business suit and standing behind a massive desk with a nameplate that read, "Olivia Grant, CEO." "Jack," she said, and her voice was warm, almost relieved. "Thank you for coming." He didn't know what to say. His brain was trying to catch up. You're the CEO?" She nodded. "I am, and I owe you an explanation." She gestured for him to sit, and he did, still trying to make sense of it all. Olivia sat down across from him, her hands folded on the desk, and she looked at him the way she had that night in the truck, like he mattered. "I inherited this company 6 months ago," she said. "My father built it from the ground up, and when he passed, it became mine. But I didn't know anything about it." "Not really. I'd been working in finance my whole life, never spent a day on the road. So I decided to see it for myself. I wanted to know what it was like for the people who actually keep this company running. The drivers." Jack's chest tightened. "You went out there on purpose." "I did. I rented a car and drove into the mountains. I wanted to feel what it was like to be alone out there, to understand the risks, the isolation. And then the storm hit, and I got stuck. I thought I was going to die, Jack. I really did. And then you showed up." Her voice cracked a little, and she looked down at her hands. "You didn't know who I was. You had no reason to stop, but you did. You risked your life to save mine, and you didn't ask for anything in return. You just helped me, like it was the most natural thing in the world." Jack felt his throat go tight. "I couldn't just leave you there." "Most people would have," she said softly. "Or they would have called someone and kept driving. But you didn't. You stayed with me. You made sure I was okay, and that told me everything I needed to know." She stood up and walked around the desk, and Jack stood too, feeling awkward and out of place in this big office with its leather chairs and city views. "This company has lost its way," Olivia said. "We've been treating our drivers like numbers, like replacements, and that ends now. I'm rebuilding Titan from the ground up, and I want you to help me do it. I'm promoting you to Director of Driver Operations. You'll oversee training, safety, and support for every driver in this company. Because if there's anyone who understands what it means to be out there on the road, it's you." Jack stared at her. He couldn't believe what he was hearing. "You're serious?" "I've never been more serious in my life." He felt something shift inside him. For 23 years, he'd been invisible. Just another trucker hauling freight across the country. Nobody knew his name. Nobody cared. But now, standing in this office, looking into Olivia's eyes, he felt seen, recognized, respected. "I don't know what to say," he admitted. "Say yes," she said with a small smile. And he did. Over the next few months, Jack worked side by side with Olivia to transform Titan Freight. They built better rest stops, improved communication systems, and created a support network for drivers who were struggling. Jack made sure every driver knew they mattered, that they weren't just cogs in a machine. And Olivia listened. She trusted him. She valued his experience, his honesty, his heart. One evening, after a long day of meetings, they stood together in her office, looking out at the city lights. "You changed my life, Jack," Olivia said quietly. "That night in the storm, you reminded me what it means to be human, to care about someone, just because it's the right thing to do." Jack looked at her, and he saw not the CEO, but the woman he'd pulled from that frozen car. The woman who'd been scared and alone, just like he'd been so many times on the road. "You changed mine too," he said. "I spent my whole life thinking nobody noticed what I did, but you did, and that means more than you know." She smiled, and there was something in that smile that felt like hope, like the beginning of something good. In the end, Jack realized that kindness isn't just something you give away. It comes back to you, often when you least expect it. And sometimes, a single act of compassion on a cold, dark night can light up the rest of your life.